So we're super excited to welcome Dr. Ann Kennedy. I will not say the doctor anymore. We'll just call you Ann, but she is the fabulous. I mean, look at all these notes I took. Ann. She is the fabulous author of, and she'll tell you she hates the title of her book, which is ridiculous because sometimes we just need the direct title to tell us we need to pick and read this. But this is Making Tough Decisions About End of Life Care and Dementia. But I met Ann at a really cool event called the Care Colloquium, and I can still not say that word. Um, but Ann just like at the last minute joined this crazy group of people that are in the space of what they call the care economy, just lots of different people. And I don't know. I don't know what drew to me to Ann, but she's just this warm spirit. And when I learned she handed me this book after telling me it's a terrible title, but Ann and I kind of stuck together because we just saw so much of the same and had the same feelings around what it's like to be a daughter, to be a caregiver. And what I loved about her is that when I was telling, I forget what we were talking about, but she's like, tough decisions. Yeah, they're tough, but I know how to tell people how to help them do this. And I was like, well, I want to bring you to this group of women because I've heard, and Ann and I were just talking about like when I think of like some of the tough things on daughters' plates, these are the stories that I hear, and we're just gonna, and Ann and I will go back and forth and kind of share that, and then we'll open the floor if there's something specific. But the first thing that I always hear daughters kind of start bothering them, or they don't know how to bring or talk about it, is my parent is not taking care of themselves. How do I talk to them about why aren't they taking care of their health? Why, what's happening, right? So there is a wrong and there is a right way. And Anne's very good at like kind of like here's how I would approach that. So we'll get into that. Second thing you're going to face as a daughter is especially for parents that might be still living at home, is your house is falling apart. It's not safe anymore. Like there's just this growing worry about their safety and what you're observing as a daughter in their home. And last, which is definitely, Ann, and I'll let you kind of tell about your background. I mean, Ann is a physician. She's trained in palliative care. She's a geriatrician. She just has this depth of knowledge of, I know a conversation that I'm avoiding with my parents, but need to have is, what are things I could be asking today to learn about what quality of life is? What kind of medical decisions? Because I'll tell you right now, if you're a part of daughterhood, you're likely in your future is making some really tough decisions for someone you love. And Anne's going to kind of give some tips that we could have. And maybe if it's not even the family member, tips of that's you're going to be making for, because they cannot have that discussion anymore due to dementia or something cognitively, and that they can't hold that conversation, but there's still things that you could be having with siblings and people to kind of figure out and help support you. So, and first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like,
Okay. I am a doc. I've been in practice for about 35 years. I was drawn to geriatrics from the get-go, and partly because of the palliative care side. I am an oddball in that when they told me, or when they were trying to coach me through medical school, like you have to pick something to be, and then think about whatever specialty that is, what's their bread and butter. Um, in geriatrics, the bread and butter is dementia. And I'm like, oh, I love older adults, and I always have. And I used to tease that it was because when like older men would look at me, they'd tell me how beautiful I was. And I'd be like, oh, I love it when you can't see and you can't hear. So I'm even beautiful to you. So it was a great place to work, obviously, because the people were amazing. And I loved my practice, but I really learned about daughterhood when my mom became ill with dementia. And it was kind of that marriage of being knowledgeable and um, and then where the rubber meets the road, and then having to be the daughter and taking my own advice or not taking my own advice, probably more often than not. And then to really kind of marinate in those tougher conversations, or in kind of in that complexity. And that's what I love about geriatrics, is that it's about kind of that complexity of the person keeping it much more holistic, much less medical than medical. It's you're taking care of the whole person, and I just love that part. And so when I was looking to help, I come from a family that is hyper intellectual, and so when I was trying to help my siblings get through my mom's life with dementia, but mostly then her death from dementia, I looked for a book to try to help me understand how to help them. And I couldn't find one. So because I'm your classic daughter caregiver, I overdid it. I tried to raise my three kids, have a pretty intense job, and do daughterhood perfectly for the caregiving part of daughterhood perfectly, because God forbid it be anything less than that. And so I fell apart and actually got sick after my mom died, as many care people do. And so I needed to, well, for all kinds of reasons, needed to step away from my job, and sat on the couch and wrote the book that, while I kind of got better from my illness, to practice medicine, I wrote the book that I wish I had had for my siblings.
Aw.
Um,
And I want to quote you on, this is one of my favorite, most moving things of your book right here. These emotions I could understand, feel, and allow to move through me with laughter and tears. Well, honestly, I could once I had sought the help of a wonderful therapist and began to meditate regularly. The hardest were the ugly emotions I was feeling: the worry, guilt, boredom, anger, and resentment. At times, I felt schizophrenic, grateful one moment for the time I had with my mother, and guilty and worthless the next that I had not done enough to care for her. So I think that just summarized so much of what you're saying, Anne, about your story, and the fact that you took that time and that healing to basically what I love about you is you took that time to impart that wisdom and the lessons that you wish you had into knowledge. And what I something about Anne's book is because of her experience, in being a practitioner, she has stories. She uses stories to teach lessons and things. So, and um, kind of tackling into that first thing I know some daughters face a lot is of when you see a parent, for all kinds of reasons, right? And this might be why, the advice that you give, but they're doing okay. And then they're not, and they seem like they're just stopped taking care of themselves. Like what's kind of your tips, or what would you do to approach that parent?
well, first is I try to remember always that the person, the parent, has a right to be whoever they are. And that's the hardest part, because sometimes you do know better, but coming at them with that, but I can see that things aren't going well and I know better, isn't going to help them. So as a daughter, I try to get the daughters to take a moment and step back and look at it more from a 30,000 foot or 20,000 foot view, and look down at the whole situation. If you're a parent and your daughter starts telling you what to do, or son, it's too big of a, like, and it brings up so many things. And one thing we know how to do in families is push each other's buttons, whether we want to or not. It's just, I think we were born with buttons just for family members.
Absolutely.
And so you have to realize that these are complicated and complex relationships with years and years of history. And they may not see you quite as the adult that you are, and you might not see them as the adult that they are, because you have this relationship with them. So sometimes it's good to step back and go, okay, what are my intentions for this conversation? Because if you kind of go at the usual family dynamics, it isn't, there's already a mismatch in the power, right? Parents historically have more power than the kids. But if you come at it more of a, hey, I've noticed, I'm noticing some things. And then I say, first step back and get your own emotions in order. And so for me, we know that when we're emotional, we're not thinking as well. That's just part of human nature. And so you have to kind of modulate your own emotions first, because if you come at them too emotionally, they'll go into emotion, you'll stay in emotion, and nothing happens. And so I use one of my favorite self-compassion tips is to get your parasympathetic system modulated, is hand on heart. And
Okay.
so when you're feeling hand on heart, and if everybody just can do it,
Yeah.
it will bring out your oxytocin. And so one, it'll take your adrenaline down, and some of your other neurohormones that are kind of, when you're afraid for your parents, you need to get back to that place of warmth. So hand on heart. And I have a patient that used to go, hand on heart, hand on heart, hand on heart. I was like, no, 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 no. Hand on heart is a hand on heart and like deep breathing. And that will get you down. And then you can think through, how do I want this to go? Because when I used to see my mom, like she was going out in Nebraska winters with a windbreaker on, and then the car broke down once and she almost froze to death. And I was like, my emotional level was up here, like, what
Yeah.
the? I was like,
No.
no, no, no. She shaming her because you're afraid is not going to help, so I like get myself in order, hand on heart, and then say, hey, and then start with just the facts. I'm noticing that sometimes your meals you used to make such beautiful meals for us. Why are you just eating toast now? Or, and just start with some fact. And then it isn't, and be curious. So I would say, regulate your emotions, talk about facts you see, not
Not the emotions or feelings that you're
right,
having. Okay.
facts you're seeing, and then, and be curious.
Right.
Because maybe it's that, oh, I can't open jar. I mean, it might be something simple that you can problem solve around. And it might be that you'll hear depression. And then if you say, oh, I'm hearing a little bit of sadness or loneliness, or, you know, or whatever is that right? And then be back curious. Is that right? Would you say that's right? That what I'm hearing is accurate? And if your parent starts to like strong arm you, sometimes you have to just back away, and you've planted that seed, and then go, I just want you to, and when I was raising my kids, I'm historically a screamer, a yeller. Um, but
Did you have boys too?
I had two boys at the time. I ended up with two boys and a girl, but they call it my no yelling. I went to no yelling class, which was how to talk to kids so kids will listen, and listen so kids will talk.
That's
And
awesome.
one thing that the two women who wrote that book said was, get on the same side as your kid. Like, oh, so if you step away emotionally and say, I want to be on my mom's side, or on my parents' side, not against them. If you're starting to notice they're strong arming you, that's when you bring in the love. You say, oh God, I just love you. And then just back away from the conversation for a little bit, but just end it with the emotions of, I care so much about you. I love you so much.
Worried
You
about you. Yeah.
I- or and maybe not even end the conversation with that I'm worried about you, but you are amazing to me. And like leave it on a high. And then that's planted the seed that I'm worried about you.
Right.
But
You don't need to say that, right? It's more of just, I gotcha. Okay. Because
so
that's
just
what
kind
I
of
would.
keep it with, I love you. I love you. And what are your intentions when you went in there was, I love you, right? I'm worried about you because I love you, but
Ah,
they still get to be the adult that they are. And
yeah.
sometimes when you're doing that objective part, you can say, okay, I'm more worried about something that might happen than what's actually happening. And I think your second part is, what if when you do see a safety issue?
Right. No, and well, and I have one other thing, because like I have some stories too. And it's because you get so caught up in the checklist of caregiving, right? Like, oh, you gotta take your meds, you gotta do this, and you gotta do that. And then like you get more and more resistance, and then you kind of blame that person not wanting to take care of them. And it has been so effective, like what you said, is taking that big view and being like, do you like taking all these medicines? Or, like just asking, being curious. I think that's a
Curious.
great approach of, rather than, because obviously how you're feeling is coming from an emotion. And so that motion of like putting your hand on a heart, that's so, and if no one's ever done things like that, I know that can feel weird to do, but I really advise it because it makes you
And
you think at a different part of your brain when you're in that fight or flight, and when you're seeing something that is impacting your parent that could harm them, even long term, or short term, we are reacting in a way that's not going to benefit that conversation. So I think that is a great tip.
so I find hand on heart's the best, but if you're in a place where you can't do that, even holding your own hand, and
Okay.
that is much less. I mean, people think that if you put your hand on your heart, people will notice, but they usually don't. You can easily put your hand on your heart and no one's the wiser. But the other one is holding your hand. When I used to work, I would often hold my own hand to calm myself down.
Yeah. And you look like, so, like you're pensive and thinking. All right,
No
when
one
you're
knows I'm panicking. I'm
No,
panicking
I'm
here.
totally panicking right now. Yeah, and that's okay. See, it's all about perception.
Yeah.
You already starting to tackle, but yes, like I have heard this out of daughters' mouths, and this might be some, of folks on this call, is like, my parent won't let anyone else help but me, right? Or and it's, again, it's that you are starting. A lot of us don't call ourselves caregivers. I know that's a big challenge. I hear in the care economy, because we start doing these small things. It's the filling the medication, it's dropping off some extra meals in the freezer, right? It's running a parent to an appointment. And before we know it, those tasks are getting more and more. And there's something that happens, and you kind of realize, like, you kind of like, again, you'll go that big view, and you're like, oh my God, we're not managing this. Like, they're not safe, or there's just too much to be done. Like, I can't manage this anymore. How to have that conversation with your parent, right? Because you want to be their person, right? But you can't do it all.
Right.
Like, what is that conversation like, Anne, or what any tips that you have?
Well, again, I think it's still it's kind of an extension of the conversations we were just having, because that one's much more about um, just some things you're starting to observe or some things that you might be starting to wonder about. But when it's starting to impact you as well,
Right.
I think you have all the rights in the world to start stating your needs as well. And so I think you come to the conversation, and here's the hard part, is you have to be honest.
Yes. I think that's what's
And
hard for
that's
all of us.
it's hard for all of us because we want our parents to approve of us. We really do. Even when, I mean, there was an aide that used to go, God, your mom can still get you to behave just with that look. I'm like, I know. I know. I'm in my 50s and she's in her 80s, and I know
Right.
that doesn't go away. Um, but the hard part is, first you have to be honest with yourself, because if you're not, you'll just keep running yourself into the ground. And that's, I think, what most of us do. And that's where I think, for me, I needed to go to therapy because I let myself get too far down the road. And the therapist definitely got me to meditate, which slowed me down enough so that I could think clearly, and journal. Because sometimes you, it's hard to even admit to yourself what you really need.
Yep.
But a therapist is one place, and not everyone's open to therapy. I kind of think of therapy like eyeglasses, like if I need reading glasses, I get reading glasses. If I need mental health, I I get it. But I know that's not I mean, I love talking about death. I get that I'm an oddball. There's things I love. Dementia, another thing most people don't like to talk about. So I, I know I'm odd, and but most of us will get reading glasses. We might not show them to anyone, but we usually get them. Um, but if you're not willing to go to therapy, um, I would highly recommend journaling.
Mhm.
And if you feel like your journal's not safe, rip it up every day. But get the words out on paper so you can see them, and ask yourself some of those tough conversations. And then when you're going to go talk to your parents, it might be worth scripting it, but keep some of those same things, like go in there with curiosity, keep going in there, but say, and then go in there with an intention and say, mom, dad, I need to talk to you about how things are going here. I I want to tell you what I'm doing. I want to hear what your biggest goals are. So it could be that they're having a hard time staying in their house and are lonely and it's too much for them. And the idea of going to assisted living or some other level of care might be just what they want. Who knows if you don't have the conversation?
True.
It could be that they say, I only want you because they don't want to hurt your feelings. Who knows? But if you go in there and say, I love you, and I'm feeling like everything I'm doing is becoming too hard that I can't spend time with you like emotionally,
Yep.
how can we get a how can what would you like if I gave you a list of everything I do, again, go with facts. If I give you a list of everything I do, can let's talk about what you will let somebody else do on this list. And then just get them to start with one thing. And then, but again, you've started that conversation.
Right.
One, you've done it from a loving place, not like, I can't keep doing this, but I feel like I'm losing my relationship with you
Right.
because I'm so burdened. And I mean, I don't know if I'd use the word burden, but because that
That
might be one of those
yeah,
triggers.
probably one of those words, right?
That might be a button. But if you say, my intention is to have a loving relationship with you,
Yeah, to spend time with you doing things that we used to love to do, right?
not necessarily making sure your gutters are cleaned.
Right.
What do you say we hire out the gutters?
Right. Please.
Not to mention, none of us are safe up on that ladder. Okay.
Right.
And then, I mean, I think you should go in prepared after thinking it through, thinking of all the facts, and then
Yeah.
having your list of facts kind of ready, maybe some conversations and the way you think they might go. And, what if it went terrible? What might be your response? What if it went, medium? And then what if it went great? And then kind of, I think a lot of times we don't go into these conversations because we don't usually have them.
Right.
And two, we're afraid that it's going to go somewhere terrible. But if you kind of visualize the terrible and go, oh, how terrible is that?
Right.
It's not that bad. It's we were uncomfortable for a day. But again, if your intention is that you're going to end it with love, but no matter what, whenever you kind of hit some of the tough spots, that you slow it down and go back to the intention. Like, maybe we should take a break today. This is a lot. And I
Yeah.
want to make sure that we don't get angry at each other, or, I mean, that we get angry at the situation, but not at each other.
Right.
The situation is getting icky, but we are still here and beautiful together.
Right. No, it's because I mean, a lot of times it is this external stress and it's trying to figure out how to name that. It's like, I think it's dad's recent cancer diagnosis has just us all on edge, right? And we're spinning our wheels trying to think about what to do. And, um, it is those hards because in my head, I'm like, this is wearing me out. Like, like, how do you, it is like you
Right.
have to,
Well, you put all that in your journal. This is
yes,
wearing me out.
this is
And
where
so
practicing.
those are some of your facts, but
Yeah.
those facts are part of another story. So
Okay.
then from that, this is wearing me out. And now, that story keeps going until I resent you guys for not taking on help. But you don't want to point that finger.
Right.
But so going backwards from I resent you for not accepting help, you go back to I'm worn out. Oh, there's 50 jobs I'm taking on right now, and I'm raising my own kids, and I might be losing my father to cancer. And, like,
Right.
it's multi-layered, right?
It is.
But so I'm a hospice doc. And when daughters sometimes come to the hospice team just so angry, and sometimes the team gets upset, and I'm like, you guys, she's losing her dad.
Yeah.
let's have some, and once you kind of reframe it and you go, oh,
That's why
okay,
they're acting the way. Yeah,
that's,
like
yeah.
yeah,
And then you can go, oh, so how do I not look what she's doing, but what's making her do that?
right,
Or so when you say that about your parents, what's making them do that? They're probably afraid. Like they
right.
may be lashing out. They may be wrestling with control, like only my daughter can do this. And you have to say, I know you would like that I could do everything, but I'm only one and I need help.
Right.
And
And then ask them like what scares you about asking other people for help? What do you think that experience would be like? Could we try this, and see if it works, right?
right.
It is. It's
And
tough. And
it,
I think the hardest part is your needs, right? Because it's that parent child. Like my parents have raised 5 kids, they've worked their butt off. Like I can't imagine the day that I have to tell them something I need because I don't feel like I would deserve it. Like,
but you do.
but you
But
do.
you do. And and I heard somebody say once something that really turned it around for me thinking about daughters. And this was after my sandwich part was over in my life. But they said, there's legacies, right? And you're your parents' legacy, and your kids are your legacy. So, and that's when I was like, oh God, the needs of the sandwiched one are so important, because this is the generational love or trauma, or it is the generational. So the one, I mean, sometimes when you're in the middle, you have to declare your needs because it
You're
affects your legacy.
someone else is watching you. Yeah. Oh, that puts it in perspective, doesn't it? And I
Right.
know we're already getting some questions in the chat, and so and I know this was also on our Facebook page too. So I want to tell everybody we're going to open up for questions, just kind of getting through these high level things to create comfort, of people wanting to ask Anne some tips, but um and maybe we can hit on this one, but tips on how to handle the conversation when a parent has dementia and isn't able to recognize their own deficits.
Yeah. So that probably gets to be one of the most difficult,
Yeah.
is that um there a lot of dementias is part of the one, it helps to know it's part of the disease, that they may not recognize their deficits, that they're not just putting their head in the sand, and that they're not um being extra ornery
The
or
disease is
whatever.
actually making them not see their own
Right.
deficits. Okay.
And sometimes that apathy that, or when we talked in the beginning, and people just stop taking care of themselves. Apathy can also be part of dementia, that is not depression even, but it's part of the disease. So those two things I hear about a lot, like they don't get it, and or they just have completely stopped taking care of things. And that's a hard part, where you usually need to say, I understand that you're seeing that everything's going okay, but you actually have to take over, because
No, that question, it makes me think of if they don't recognize their own deficits. I mean, something we do a lot in the dementia friends session is then you kind of start building that environment to strengthen and prevent those deficits. And that's kind of when your daughterhood role really starts kicking in.
right. And 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 it's hard, again, to take on that shift in responsibility from your family history role, that you're going to realize that you don't want to take all decisions away necessarily. And so it's that balance of having a conversation where you say, Mom, an example in my mom's life was, she so badly wanted to live independently, and she did okay with her second husband. For a while, they were both starting to have dementia, and they filled in each other's gaps. But he got acutely ill, and his daughter swooped him away, and then it left her without that. And so we were like, she was mad at us. We were like, you can't live independently. We allowed it, but then we came in with facts that said, we're seeing this, this, and this. And as much as I know you think those things haven't happened, they have. And And I don't, we want you to have as many choices as you can, but there are some minimums that we're going to have to put into place. And one for my mom was that she had to go somewhere where somebody would manage her medicines because she couldn't do it. And we were going to have her go to an assisted living. Then at the 11th hour, she said, I'm not going to that one. I'm going to go to this other one. And we were like, all right, but you have to go to the nurse's station every day for
That's
your
her way of control, like some
Yeah.
part of the
Yeah.
control. Yeah.
Yeah. And so she used to call it the pill factory, and she'd get this little sneer. And I'm like, I know you hate the pill factory, but you're living independently. And we would just like try to keep it light and go, I'd hate the pill factory too, but maybe we should talk about getting rid of some of the pills, like, and then there's so you try to, with dementia, sometimes it's never going to be good that people are going to be mad at you, but just try to lighten it up and divert after, like distract or divert, but you still have to make some of the decisions when there's a safety issue.
But you're making those decisions on facts and observations, and you try to present that. And if they're still not listening, then that's kind of when
Yeah.
Anne's giving you permission of, yes, you should go
And
into daughterhood mode.
and I honestly, I will tell daughters who call me, I'll give you a script, and I would write scripts like, you can no longer drive on my prescription pad. That would be,
Oh, and can you practice in Indiana? Teach your lesson.
I guess the point is, go ask your doc for
Right.
that script. And then the doctor becomes the bad guy, or type up a letter that looks like it could have come from this, whomever, and that becomes refrigerator. Like,
Interesting.
sorry, not my bad. It's the Department of Motor Vehicles. They said you can't, or the doc. I mean, sometimes you want to keep your relationship with your doc. I was the geriatric doctor, so I was often the specialist. And so they still had their primary care doctor that they could go to. But, and you don't know how many patients used to come to me going, you're the one that won't let me drive. I'm like, yep, that's me.
I'm the bad guy. Well, and we keep getting great questions, and so I'll keep them
Okay.
coming. And then I do want to hit up medical decisions, but this one's great because it is. I think you did address this in your book too. I remember reading, is not everybody's relationship with their parents is warm and loving, and you try really hard, but like you said, there's those buttons that get pushed on both sides. Is there any more tips about shedding that emotional history when the relationship changes due to dementia?
Um, so I'm sorry that your relationship wasn't great, and I completely get that. I think that when your relationship was not great, you have to, again, this is where I think therapy and counseling is very helpful. And um, and realizing that you don't have to be, and sometimes it's better that you're not being the primary caretaker. And that is perfectly fine. There are people out there, and I know this group will never believe it because you're here in a daughterhood group, but there are people out there completely abandoned by their families. And so it is always a choice how much care you choose to give. If somebody was harmful to you emotionally, physically, sexually, then it's probably better that someone else take care of them for some of the day, and you either just make sure that happens if that's your responsibility. But you don't have to be the one. If through therapy you can see that we're all flawed human beings, and you can get to the place where, because the dementia is changing them in some ways, that the essence of who they are will likely be there. But I have seen it where some people become better people in their dementia, in that some of the crap that they held gets forgotten, and they're able to be better people. If it helps you then be able to have a better relationship with them, not bad. And if you can get past some of your own stuff, and again, that's hard work, and we don't all we're not all willing to do hard work. I think people in groups like this though are those type of people who are
We're trying.
moving towards self, yeah,
Yeah.
moving towards self-actualization. And so I think Buddhist philosophy helps with things like non-attached. I mean, I think Buddhist philosophy helps, and that doesn't go against anyone's religion. I mean, it's again, it's a practice. Um, Mindfulness is helpful, and I think journaling and helping you get through some of those emotions. Um, but I also give you permission to say
Yeah.
it's okay. Uh,
No,
a
it's sometimes people, when they realize they have a choice, it makes them realize, I will do this.
Right.
Because it's because sometimes people feel stuck. Because I've done that, because that's been what it's amazing. I had the same conversation, a woman whose mother was a very abusive alcoholic, and she got the call because she's the emergency contact. And she was the first, that call, she was like, that you're the first person to tell me that I could just, because I'm like, yeah, there's programs for the Indiana, it's called the Center for At-Risk Elders. There are places that you can say that this is not a good situation. There are organizations that do take on managing older adults, care and whatnot. So
Right. And
sometimes
that's
knowing that you
fine.
even have that option is kind of like a lift on the heart, and it makes you realize, no, I am going to do this, but I can hire the team and I can manage it, and I won't engage that way. So, but
And you
the
can start with those great intentions. You can get in there and you can realize, oh, baby, she is pushing every button I have. And if she keeps, I mean, I've had people who are like, look, I'm 12 years sober and I'm taking care of my mom now and I'm about to use again. And I'm like,
that's not good
your
for you.
sobriety is not, shouldn't be up for grabs here. Someone else needs to take care of her if you feel like this is so much stress on you that you're going to lose your sobriety. No, that's a, those are limits, those are boundaries. That's places it's okay to say my being and your being are both important, but only I get to take care of my being, and we'll find somebody else to take care of your being.
Yeah. No, that's, I sometimes I think just hearing that is a very empowering thing. So thank you for saying it so eloquently, Anne. And we will stop for questions, but you're welcome to keep putting in the chat. That's wonderful. But just to kind of really touch on in these last 20 minutes that we have together and your expertise, is, I know, I mean, my parents just turned 65. My mom showed me her, like, the lawyer. I hate that they like do this privately with a lawyer, like, and she like cried that she doesn't want a feeding tube or, and I go, Mom, I'm glad you did that, but we're going to have a lot of conversations over the next 10 years. But I've yet to engage on that conversation. What are things that we could be doing or saying, or things that we can, ways to ask our parent? Because I think having those check boxes don't do it justice, because
Check
you don't
yeah.
even know the situation you're going to be in and the decisions you have to make. And what I have learned in just working with families is they must come from a place of understanding what the goal is, what meaning of life is. And so just any kind of tips that you have, Anne, on things that we can observe if they can't have that conversation, weird, odd questions we can ask about that
Yeah.
aren't too off-putting. Because like you said, I'm like you, I love talking about death, but not everybody does.
So what I say to most people is you should usually start with, how do you want to live? Like, so start the conversation with what gives your life meaning. Like, and great times are things like Thanksgiving dinners and winter holidays that are, when people are coming together and they're supposed to be joyous and grateful and thankful, and just say, what, like, give me something weird that makes life like, and and that can start that. Those are ways in, like, or what did you do as a kid that like, what's your favorite memory from your childhood, and who was it with? And then that starts getting towards relationships. And um what's your best day? Is it curled up on a couch reading a book, or is it like being at a party? And just start figuring out how they like to live, and looking for those breadcrumbs and asking questions about them. And then just, again, curiosity. But really, it's about living. And then you can go, and then I often bring in, oh, a friend of mine just found out that their fill in the blank grandmother, mother, whatever, just got so sick with something. What would you do if, and
Don't
so,
even
but
think about them, just listen to how they describe. Yeah.
yeah, or, bring up, tell me more about your grandmother and how, can you tell me about that? And then how did she die? And then how did everybody feel after that happened? Like if it was, oh, she got rushed off to the hospital or she died at home, and you'll find out, were they okay that she died at home, or did that traumatize, like you were 5, how was that for you? And then um you'll just learn more, but mostly people want, I think the clues on how they want to live are much more fun. Like my,
Yeah.
my kids know that I'll just want the smell of chocolate chip cookies all the time, just in my house all the time.
And
And
I want my obituary to be just my chocolate chip recipe. That's what I want my kids to write for my obituary. I don't want anything else. I mean, maybe their names on the bottom, but but yes, it's important to just share these weird tidbits, right? To
yeah,
say,
yeah. Or, like, what makes you laugh till tears run down your face? What makes you cry until tears run down your face? I mean, those are the questions. They don't have to be, what about death? Another thing to think about is, I don't know if any of you have ever been to a death over dinner. And I think Gene and I, or did we not talk about this?
I don't know,
Death
maybe I
over
know Regina
dinner.
just hopped on too. Maybe this is something you and Regina talked about. Yeah.
Okay. So, Death Over Dinner was a brainchild of a guy named Hebb, Hebb. It's in the book as well, but he was on a train ride going to see his father, who was living with dementia. And he talked to 2 doctors who were talking about how people don't talk about death. And he's a restaurateur and probably a provocateur. And he came up with this idea of death over dinner. He said, because who doesn't talk about stuff over dinner and with a little bit of wine or some other cocktail? And he curated a bunch of things, and it's on his website, deathoverdinner.org, I think it is. But so basically you invite people over to talk about death at dinner, but there's stuff that they were going to read or see before they come over. And he's got a whole list of things you can go through that just kind of help. And they're not all sad and morbid. Some of them are beautiful and touching, and it just helps people start to have conversations like that. And so I do it a lot of times with people that I worked at a long-term care facility. I had a bunch of people like that. I did it with my book club because they were like, I cannot believe you want to talk about death. I was like, it's not so bad. Come on, let's try it. And so those are kind of fun things too. And I was going to do it with my siblings, but then actually one of my siblings got really sick and died. So we didn't do it.
Only you can laugh at that right now.
I know. A few years later, I can laugh at it.
No, absolutely. No,
Yeah.
but I love your approach of, because I think those things about what is living is what you hold up when you have to make those really hard decisions. So if I hear my dad talking about, I want to be able to run my 5K races, and then it's like those surgeries and we're battling, like, how does this impact his mobility? Because I know
Mhm.
that is what's so important to my dad. And if I don't hear good outcomes for it, is the surgery really worthwhile? If it's going to take away the thing that he loves, or not let him return to that life that he had always tell me that he wants up until the end. Right. So
Right. And then you could also say to him, now that you're facing this, I know the 5K was important, but is it the competition? Could we get you a
yeah,
recumbent bike? Would that
yeah,
be as cool? Like, so,
no,
but it's also a way to say to him, tell me, tell me more. Is it the running? Is it the competition? What is it that you love so much about the 5Ks that you think, oh, that's the only thing? Because sometimes it's not, like people say, like making the check boxes, but once you're in the boat and the hole hits the boat, your discussions about the boat might change. So like,
it's so true. Absolutely.
but again, those are discussions about, again, it's a discussion with your dad, not about dying, but about living. How do you want to live?
Right.
Is like, should we all start learning pinochle so you can win at that? Like what? how do you
You
get what
you
you
have nailed my
want?
dad. No, we grew up, we were a very competitive family. So it is all about competition. So it might not be running for later in life. I'll have to figure out another joy for him. to figure
Well,
out.
or he'll figure it out, but you'll start the conversation so that that will
Yeah.
bubble up.
Right, absolutely. But I'm going to stop recording so that, if anyone has any personal questions for Anne, we can kind of open that floor. But Anne, thank you so much for letting us record this and get this out into the world. And again,
Yeah.
for sharing your knowledge in your book about making tough decisions about the end of life of care and dementia. I definitely, as you can tell from my flags, it is a very great resource for anyone that is kind of facing this road ahead. So let me stop recording.